The purpose of this hint is to take a look at price indices, singular is price index. This could be a GDP deflator, it could be a consumer price index, it could be producer price index, etc. But it's an index that it shows what's happening to the price of something in a particular sector. And the base year is 100 generally for a price index. So what we can see just looking right away is that if the base year is 2014, right, because 2014 is when the price index is 100, and the easy number to show is the inflation rate from 2014 to 15. From 2014 to 2015, this has gone from 100 to 110, so that's clearly 10%. And we would get that 10% from simply taking 110, the price index in 2015, minus 100, the price index in 2014, divided by the beginning price index, which is 100, okay, which is clearly 10 over 100, or 10%, okay? So that's how we got that. All right, now we're going to try it from 2015 to 2016. What has there been inflation or deflation? Well, the index is going up, so we know it's inflation. So our question is, how much? Can we simply take this 114 minus 110 and say, okay, that's going to be 4, okay, and that's also 4%? No, because now the base number for the 114 minus 110 is going to be 110, which was the index in 2015. We have to use that as our bottom number. And when you figure that out, you use your calculator, what you'll find is that when we take 4 over 110, it's approximately 3.6%. So it's going to be smaller than the kind of the obvious number was going to be 114 minus 110. All right, so when you're doing inflation rates with these price indices, we have to be very clear, what you're going to be putting on the bottom, right? All right, so now let's go on to another problem. Let's first remember that nominal GDP means unadjusted for inflation or deflation, just the actual number that is calculated for the economy. GDP is gross domestic product, recall. Now, real GDP has been adjusted for price changes. So nominal is unadjusted, real is adjusted. So the next thing we're going to learn to do is to move back and forth between nominal and real GDP. In the base year, 2014, this is quite simple. In the base year, nominal and real are the same thing. So we don't need to adjust at all. So now let's go to 2015. Now we're going to have to adjust this nominal GDP of 19 trillion to the real, what is the real GDP? Let's say we don't know that it's 17.3 trillion. I want to show you how you get that. Well, it looks like, by the way, we have a really big increase in our GDP, right? 17 trillion to 19 trillion. That looks really good. But we can't forget that we also have an increase. Let's say this is the GDP deflator, which would probably be the appropriate index. And we see that we have an increase of 10%. So basically, if we had an increase of 10% in nominal GDP, we would just have the same level of real GDP. It wouldn't have changed at all. So this nominal has to increase by more than the price index, or by more than 10%, in order to have an increase in real GDP. Now we see there is a small increase in real GDP. So we have had an increase in nominal GDP that is greater than the rate of inflation. So let's show you how you figure that out. First, I'm going to use the way that the book tells you to do it, okay? And that is like this. You take the nominal GDP of 19.0 trillion, right? You divide it by the price index for that year, 2015, which is 110. And then after you make that calculation, you finish up by multiplying by 100. And if you do that with your calculator, you should get, and I rounded it off, but approximately 17.3 trillion. I sometimes draw a line through my sevens the European way, but that's a 17.3. Okay? Now I'd like to show you the way I do it, which is just a little bit of a shortcut. What I just did there is equivalent to doing this, 19.0 trillion divided by, I still am going to put the index of 110, but I'm going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. So we'll have 1.10 because we took 110 and we simply moved the decimal 1 place and then 2 places to the left, which is equivalent to dividing by 100. Okay? And if you noticed the formula at the top here, if you do this and then you multiply by 100, that would be the same thing as having this denominator divided by 100. So that's all we're doing here. So when we do this calculation in one step, we find that we're going to get, again, 17.3 trillion, and we're done. Okay? Now you should be able to take the 2016 nominal GDP of 19.5 trillion and adjust it either by dividing by 114 and then multiplying by 100, or by simply dividing by 1.14, and you should then get this other figure, the real GDP of 17.1 trillion. Now the last thing I'd like to show you on this hint is this calculation for per capita real GDP. Okay? So per capita means in Latin per head. So what we're going to be doing is taking a GDP figure. In this case, it specifies real GDP per capita. So we'll be working with this real GDP number. And we're going to divide it by the number of people, the number of heads, the population. So beginning with 2014, we'll do 2014 here, we will be taking the real GDP, which is 17 trillion, 17.0 trillion, and dividing it by the population, which is 300 million. Okay? So you should immediately see that there's a problem here, and that is that the trillions don't match the millions. We have to make these amounts of dollars here match up. So the easiest thing to do, I think, is to put it in terms of millions. Now, so this is then equivalent to 17,000. Now, it's 17,000 would be billions, 17,000 billions, but we want millions, so we need 3 more zeros. So now we have 17 million, right? So it's 17 million millions divided by 300 million. Okay, and now we can actually just go ahead and do the math. And that should round to 56,667. Okay. Notice you could also cut off this 0 and that 0, which would mean you could divide, that's 170,000 by 3, and you should also get this 56,667. You should be able to do the same thing for 2015 and come up with 57,096, and 2016 and come up with 55,882. So let's just look at these results for a minute. It's kind of interesting to see that when the nominal GDP was moving up, 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 we actually had the real GDP go up and then actually down a bit, right? And in the context of a increasing population, that's about 1% a year, then we see that the per capita real GDP did go up from 2014 to 2015, but then it went down from 2015 to 2016. So that followed the general pattern of the real GDP, but it wouldn't necessarily be the case. It would all depend on what was happening with population. Okay? So that should give you a nice orientation to all of these concepts that we've introduced.